Hate them or love them, QuickTime events or QTEs have become a part of the fabric of video games. A QuickTime event can be described as any on-screen prompt that requires input from the player on a controller within a set amount of time. Failure to perform the QuickTime event can result in penalisation, an alternate outcome, or in many cases death. The first use of QuickTime events actually predates video games and was used in the old electromechanical arcade cabinets. Nintendo's Wild Gunman was released in 1974. This used footage on 16mm film to project images of cowboys on the screen. When the rival gunslinger's eyes glow, the player must draw their pistol and shoot before the opponent can. Designed by Gunpei Yokoi, famed for creating many Nintendo innovations including the Game & Watch, the D-pad and the Game Boy, and the project was overseen by Shigeru Miyamoto. Wild Gunman was really the precursor to modern light gun games like House of the Dead, and was ported to the NES to work with the Zapper, although of course it was graphically very different. The NES version famously appeared in Back to the Future 2 but in an arcade cabinet. Another arcade game that used 16mm film to project video was The Driver, released by Casco around 1978-79. The player control panel imitated that of a car with steering wheel and pedals, and required that on-screen movements be mimicked. But these games didn't really use QTEs as we know them. What would almost be more recognisable to us as QuickTime events would come with the early 80s LaserDisc games. These arcade games would have a LaserDisc player within the cabinet which allowed for high quality video to be played on screen. The first was 1983's Dragon's Lair, developed by Advanced Microcomputer Systems and designed by Rick Dyer, which was essentially an interactive cartoon. The graphics created by Don Bluth, an ex-Disney animator who went on to create his own studio, making many iconic animated films including The Secret of Nim, An American Tail, The Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven among others. So Dragon's Lair had graphics of superb quality akin to these animated films. The player would have to direct the protagonist Dirk by pressing the relevant command at the appropriate time, be it move in a particular direction or use his sword. It was quite the spectacle at arcades but was fiendishly difficult. Now the reason I said these early LaserDisc games were almost more recognisable as QuickTime events is that they didn't have on-screen prompts. The poor arcade goer was left to discover the correct inputs for each scene through trial and error, spending their pocket money like there's no tomorrow. To make things even trickier, scenes could be played in random order and even be mirrored, requiring the opposite input. The next couple of years saw an influx of similar LaserDisc arcade games. Stern released Cliffhanger, also in 1983, which was again animated. Based on Japanese series Lupin the Third, created by Monkey Punch, it used footage from two 1970s films, The Castle of Cagliostro and The Mystery of Mamo. It had a similar control panel to Dragon's Lair with a joystick, but this time had two buttons in place of the sword button for controlling the protagonist's arms and legs. Chunk can be seen playing a cliffhanger cab in the intro to The Goonies. Later that year came another game from Advanced Microcomputer Systems and Rick Dyer, again teaming up with Don Bluth's studio, Space Ace. And another Advanced Microcomputer Systems game in 1984, who by this time had changed their name to RDI, Thayer's Quest. This introduced branching paths to the gameplay. It was offered to arcade owners as a conversion kit for Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. It was later ported to home systems under the name Kingdom: The Far Reaches. Sega tried their hand at developing a LaserDisc arcade game with animation studio Toei. Toei are well known in the West, having created a great many hugely successful animated shows including Dragon Ball, Digimon, Sailor Moon and One Piece. They also famously co-produced Transformers, animating the first two seasons. Sega and Toei's arcade game Albagas, or Cybernaut as it would have been known in North America, was based on the Toei anime series Lightspeed Electroid Albagas. This was to be released in 1983 but was cancelled by Sega before release. A significant step towards what we would consider modern QTEs came in 1984 with two arcade games that included prompts for the correct commands on screen. Universal released Super Don Quixote in October that year. It's certainly the first example I can find that included on-screen prompts for the player, which made the game far less frustrating for the more casual arcade goer. Universal planned to make several other LaserDisc arcade games, but none ever emerged. The second came a month later in November 1984 with Taito's Ninja Hayate. After a failed attempt at partnering with Sega to create a LaserDisc arcade game, Toei joined forces with Taito. Their first collaboration was Ninja Hayate. Again, this now featured on-screen prompts. Taito followed up with Space Battleship Yamato in 1985, aka Star Blazers. It was based on the Space Battleship Yamato sci-fi anime series and used footage from film Final Yamato alongside original animation created for the game. Also in 1985, Taito teamed up with Toei again to create Time Gal. These three Taito games are coming to the Switch on the 14th of December in the Taito LaserDisc collection, although this will be a Japanese exclusive. Data East threw their hat into the ring in 1985 too with Road Blaster. This used the same tech as Cobra Command and again used on-screen prompts. Looks like these prompts were here to stay. Wolf Team ported some of these LaserDisc games to the Mega CD. Ninja Hayate renamed Revenger the Ninja, Time Gal and Road Blaster renamed Road Avenger outside of Japan. The advent of home consoles and computers having CD-ROM drives brought with it not only ports of these early LaserDisc arcade games, but other interactive movies featuring FMV scenes. 1994's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on the Mega CD, developed by Orion and published by Sega, used footage from 9 episodes to create an interactive movie featuring QuickTime events. 1995's D, developed by Warp initially for the 3DO before coming to DOS, PlayStation and Saturn, was an interactive movie made up of FMV sequences. 1996's Die Hard Arcade contained what we'd become used to with regards to QTEs in games. It's a 3D beat 'em up but has intermittent sequences evolving QuickTime events. These were more interactive cutscenes or cinematics between the action, so rather than QTEs being the entire game like the previous games we've looked at, in Die Hard Arcade it was just an extra little bit of flavour. The Dreamcast era really brought QuickTime events into the spotlight. 1999's Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage, released 2 weeks before Shenmue, was a hack and slash based on the Berserk manga. This included the now familiar trope of incorporating QTEs into boss fights. Although largely a hack and slash, the boss fights would feature brief QuickTime events too. The game also offered the player choices of branching paths in the form of QTEs, which would even affect the game's outcome. Of course, the game that really thrust QTEs into our homes was Shenmue. The term QuickTime event is actually credited to Shenmue's creator Yu Suzuki, but he referred to them as Quick Timer events. Shenmue's manual refers to them as such. The game features QuickTime events galore in minigames, day-to-day activities, chase sequences and of course fight scenes. Despite being essentially a Virtua Fighter RPG, Shenmue's fighting involved a lot of QuickTime or Quick Timer events. Get these button prompts wrong or miss them and poor Ryo gets a right old shoeing. Shenmue 2 had more of the same. One particularly unique QTE in the sequel is where Ryo is at the barber's. The barber instructs him to remain still.
Listen, do not move, no matter what happens.
The player must abandon every instinct that Shenmue has drummed into them until this point, ignoring the on-screen prompt. Shenmue 2 also added CQTEs or Command QuickTime events. These briefly freeze the action on screen and give the player a sequence of button presses to execute in a specific order. At this stage, QuickTime events still felt fresh. I remember quite liking how they added a sense of interactivity to cutscenes, and on the whole, but not always, they felt like they slotted in well with the flow of the game. They were just a part of Shenmue, and for its fans, just another part of its charm. Fast forwarding a bit to 2005, which saw a bit of an explosion in the use of QTEs. Resident Evil 4 added QTEs for various acrobatic manoeuvres like running, climbing, ducking and dodging. 2 long-running franchises started in 2005 which would use QTEs throughout their respective series. Yakuza was one. Being the spiritual successor to Shenmue, of course the Yakuza series would include QuickTime events, and they've become just as much of a staple in the series as they were in Shenmue. The Yakuza games incorporate QTEs into their boss fights, much like Sword of the Berserk did, although to a greater extent. But QTEs are used for all sorts of action sequences other than fighting. God of War may be one of the best examples of how QuickTime events can be enjoyable. Again, like Sword of the Berserk, this series incorporates QTEs into its boss fights, and in God of War, the bosses are of course gods. The brutality of these fights certainly helps, and most of the QTEs actually serve to make the sequence more visceral rather than detracting from it. Both of these franchises are often lauded as good examples of using QuickTime events well. 2005 also saw David Cage and Quantic Dream release Fahrenheit, known as Indigo Prophecy in North America. This was an interactive adventure game that heavily focused on the use of QuickTime events. Quantic Dream's next game is probably better known, Heavy Rain. Released in 2010, Heavy Rain took this idea of an interactive movie to another level. Heavy Rain was essentially one long sequence of QTEs. It's funny how mundane some of the tasks are to begin with, for example something as simple as drinking orange juice, but the game is really just familiarising you with the concept. Actually, Yakuza does have some rather mundane tasks as QTEs as well, but these are often satirical lampoons for comedy value. In a way, with Heavy Rain, the use of QTEs in video games had gone full circle, going back to the early LaserDisc days where the entire game was made up of QuickTime events. But in fairness, Heavy Rain was interactivity on another level altogether, making you feel like you were actually a part of the action much more like games like Dragon's Lair ever could. This game is like video game Marmite, you either love it or hate it, but I find it helps to take it for what it is, an interactive film. Personally, I absolutely loved it. In contrast to games like God of War or Yakuza, where the QuickTime events can feel well placed and actually bolster the flow of the game, 2007's Uncharted did what was arguably the exact opposite. The game's final boss ends with a QTE that just feels sudden and out of place, leaving many players experiencing a bit of an anticlimax. Having prompts appear on the screen at the end of what was entirely a third-person action game just fell off. Another completely unnecessary use of a QTE, and one so silly it became a meme, is in 2014's Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, where the player is instructed to press F to pay respects. So as far as QuickTime events had come, they weren't always a fitting match for the gameplay. Another great modern example, and one that I think really pairs well with the source material, is 2018's Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise. I'm a big fan of the cartoon, and the finishing moves really lend themselves to being QuickTime events. It just feels like it makes sense and captures the spirit of the original source material very well indeed. Still, many people will never come around to liking QTEs despite their use.
Oh no, I just can't now.
A fact of which developers are obviously aware, and games like 2021's Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy even lets you switch them off. QuickTime events are a huge part of gaming now and still going strong, used for all sorts of interactivity from fighting to action sequences and decision making. What are your thoughts on QTEs? Do you hate them? Do you like them in certain games? If so, let me know your favourite QTEs or games containing them down in the comments. Thanks for watching.
That was great.
Nah, I'm not that good.